Great, thank you so much. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are around the world, and welcome to this session led by the Alliance for Child Protection in Humanitarian Action. And in the next hour and a half, we are hoping that together we can go through the critical action to strengthen children's well-being and protection during COVID-19. We will have a focus on the the school closures in Lebanon, DRC, and Colombia. So in terms of, that is going a little bit quickly. Hola, can we go to the next one, please? So today, you will have the pleasure to hear a little bit from me, Audrey Bollier, the Alliance Coordinator, but I promise I'll make it short. And then you will have the pleasure to hear from Laura Lee, our COVID-19 focal point, the Alliance on Protecnon, Tim Williams, COVID-19 focal point, the Alliance Protecnon. We will have Bassel Akar, education specialist and researcher in Lebanon, Jonas Abimana Bifford in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and finally, Maria Camilla Ospina, Andreas Felipe Ospina, and Simon Velasquez Matijasevic, apology if I said it wrong, from Cindy, Colombia. The last three presenters, Bessel, Jonas, Maria, Andreas, and Simon, will be presenting on the school closure. Next slide, please. Great. In terms of learning objective, what we wanted to look at today is to consider the impact of COVID-19 on children in humanitarian settings, to reflect on the challenge of to protection of children due to COVID-19 and related to school closure, to look at child protection and IDOs with the respect of humanitarian and development nexus, and to consider how to incorporate the 6 critical action into one's own context and practice and support. But just before doing so, we would like to do a little icebreaker together. We would like to hear from you and just put in the chat one word that would describe how you are feeling as you are entering the room. Personally, I feel pretty relaxed after hearing all those wonderful singers, but we would love to have a kind of temperature check from the audience before moving forward. And while you are doing so and sharing with us how you feel right now, we would like as well to inform you that at one point we will have some Q&A. And so we are hoping that you will be able to put your question in the chat box. This said, team, would you please move to the, or I think it's your turn, if I'm not mistaken. No, perfect, the workshop overview, great. So it's going to be pretty straightforward, but with some activities. We will start with introduction and the session overview, introduction to the Alliance with me. Then Tim has a few questions to ask. Then we will move to Laura, who will present you more in depth all the work we have done around child-centered critical action for protecting children during IDOs. Then we will have the great pleasure to hear from our speakers from Lebanon, DRC, and Colombia, followed by Q&A. And we will have then a group activity and we will conclude. Pretty dense, but hopefully we will be able to get to the point. Next one. Or I think I hand over to, yes, I hand over to you, Tim.
Great, thanks very much, Audrey, for that great introduction. Hi, everyone, my name is Tim Williams, and as Audrey said, I'm one of the COVID focal points for the Alliance. And to kind of whet our appetites to thinking about child protection in the context of school closure specifically, we have a couple of Zoom poll questions to ask you. I'd like to, I can't see the screen, but if someone would initiate the Zoom poll.
Hi, Timothy. 1 second. I just am having all of my team leave because the poll is going to take, it's not launching for some reason. Give me 1 second.
Okay.
I love technology.
Yeah, it's fun.
So 1 second. It's very strange. If I make you the host, Tim, could you launch the poll? It's saying that I'm logged in from another device. Are you comfortable with that at the bottom
I'll give it a
toolbar?
try. Yeah.
Okay, let me try that. I'm gonna make you the host and go ahead, and at the very bottom, you should see the polling
Okay, great.
session. So go ahead and launch your poll.
All right, so the first question, between March 2020 and March 2021, about how many children were out of school globally? Are you entering in your results? I can't see any entries yet. Or I guess I'll do that once the poll is ended.
I can't see any results yet either.
Okay,
Are you launching the poll question? Is everyone seeing the question?
It says poll ended on mine.
Okay, you can see it there?
We're now getting the results of the poll with zeros, but the poll isn't letting me enter anything. It ended the poll.
Yeah.
Okay, that's very strange. Shoot, Laura, do you think we should just continue?
Or maybe you could ask the question and people could vote in the chat.
Okay, sure, that's great. So if you can see the poll now, it says between March 2020 and 2021, about how many children were out of school globally? Anywhere between 57 million, 77 million, 122, or 168, or none of the above. All right, we've got results coming in. It's pretty uniform. You're right. 168 million children were out of school globally. Can you see the next poll question here? Pragati, or can you see the next poll question?
No.
No. Okay, shoot.
Can we potentially stop sharing and resharing it just to see?
Yeah. Okay, I don't have access to the poll anymore, but I assume someone else does. Okay.
Try now.
Okay, I'm not a host now.
Sorry.
Okay, so if you can submit, try to submit, because I have seen some colleagues can submit, and if you cannot, please put your answer in the chat.
Okay, Laura, I think we should move on, because just for the sake of time.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm not sure why it's not working. Here's the last question if you wanted to do it in the chat box. Okay, yeah, so the answer to the second question for those of you who did come in was East and Southern Africa. And the third question there is, what happened to calls to protection hotlines and helplines during COVID-19? Did they increase or decrease greatly, or not too much, or none of the above? Tim, I'll let you speak to that response there.
Thanks, Laura. And apologies again for the technical hiccups. But just to comment on the last question about did hotlines increase or decrease? The answer is really none of the above or all of the above. Just to kind of give you a sense about the kind of complexity of child protection during this time, helplines are obviously an important component of the services to address child protection during the pandemic. But we have to think about reporting figures with a degree of caution because lockdowns themselves can interfere with reporting mechanisms. Those that are feel unsafe may be unable to make calls from home, which could result in actually lower levels of reporting to hotlines or helplines. But then at the same time, maybe in other contexts, reporting has surged. So in summary, decreases in reporting or use of hotlines, particularly during a pandemic, can actually be an indication of a growing intensity of a problem rather than a reduction. So that question is really to highlight some of the complexity of thinking about child protection dynamics during school closures and during lockdown specifically. Okay, great. Apologies again for that technical hiccup. I'm going to turn it back over to Audrey now to talk about the Alliance.
Great, thank you so much, Tim. So I'm going to very quickly introduce a little bit what is the Alliance for Child Protection in Humanitarian Action, to give you some idea in a nutshell. So we are a global interagency network, a little bit similar to this one, but we are focusing on child protection in humanitarian setting, including refugee and non-refugee setting. We have over 115 members. 65% of them are national organizations across the globe. Our members are academic institutions, national and international organizations, policymakers, etc., and so on. I can still see the poll, so I can't see the screen. So apologies if I look on the other side. So on my other screen to be able to talk to you. Great. So the role or the work of the Alliance is to facilitate interagency technical collaboration on child protection in all humanitarian action. We, for example, develop technical tools and guidance that support the work of field practitioners when it comes to child protection. We do set standards and produce technical guidance. Yeah, I say it already. Obviously, for more information, we invite you to visit our website. Next slide, please. Great. So the COVID-19 response, the Alliance has been working on infectious disease outbreak before the COVID-19 pandemic. It started with the Ebola crisis in 2015 in West Africa, and child protection practitioners there were looking for technical guidance. So based on the learning from the Ebola crisis, a first guidance note was developed by the Alliance and made available. And then in 2019, we have revised our child protection minimum standards, and infectious disease outbreak was something that was included into the standards. And so, you know, in January, February 2020, when we started seeing the news of that virus kind of, you know, spreading around the world very quickly, experts in child protection, members of the Alliance, came together and said, there is something happening and we need to kind of put a quick guidance note together to be able to support the countries affected by the pandemic, at this time by the virus. It was not yet a pandemic. And so we worked around that using the first guidance note, knowledge, using the child protection minimum standards, and we developed our first technical note with the first webinar. And this was released and published a few days right after WHO declared COVID-19 a pandemic. And just to give you an idea of the impact of what we have done, this technical note, the first one, was translated in over 20 languages. Some of our national members actually reached out to us and offered to translate in local language to make sure that, you know, the guidance note was accessible. And since then, we have developed an updated technical note which we call technical note number 2, because as we were learning more and more about the COVID-19 pandemic, we wanted to make sure as well that our guidance note was the most useful and up-to-date for field practitioners. And we have since then developed 12 annexes looking at specific child protection issues. So you can find case management, child labor. We have joined forces as well with some other global network to look at education and child protection, violence against children with the Global Partnership, and etc., etc. And we have done webinars and podcasts around COVID-19 and child protection. And just to give you an idea, the technical note has been downloaded over 160,000 times last year during the peak of the period of the pandemic. Next slide, please. Great. So as I was saying, we have developed as well a series of resources. So we have our core resources, which are the technical note 1 and 2 and the 12 annexes. We have done systematic mapping of the COVID-19 and child protection resources, including in the media. We have as well worked on a series of evidence syntheses, looking at different aspects as well of child protection in relation to COVID-19. We had the series of podcasts and webinars. We have as well developed a massive online open course known as MOOC, and also some learning models around adapting programming for child protection in times of COVID-19. And I think I'll stop there and hand over to Laura to explain and dive a little bit deeper into the work that we have been doing around the 6 critical actions. Laura, the floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. My name is Laura Lee. I'm the COVID-19 focal point for the Alliance. I'm also a senior associate with Protecnon and working with this amazing team at the Alliance, INEE, and the researchers from Lebanon, Colombia, and DRC for the school closures research, which you'll hear more about. So looking at a little bit of background for the critical actions that this session is framed around, we do see that as Audrey had explained, the Alliance has really jumped in and met a gap during COVID-19 and really looking at how is COVID impacting children and how can we be active in not just protecting them, but sustaining their well-being, lifting up their voices, seeing how we can strengthen their well-being overall. Children have been impacted in, of course, several ways. These 3 ways are from one of the UN reports that came out early. We're focusing more on the secondary impacts of COVID-19, as well as thinking through the longer term effects, which is really within the theme of this presentation. Next slide, please, Tim. One thing that is really important and that has come out very strongly, and our annual meeting at the Alliance last year was focused on protecting children during infectious disease outbreaks. And one of the strongest messages was this, that we need to really confront our own power and privilege and think about how we're uplifting voices of children and communities. Next slide. We did a lot of conversations around how do we put children at the center, and really found that strengthening community and child engagement was what was critical, as well as intersectoral collaboration, capacity strengthening, and advocacy. The 6 critical actions that really arose from our conversations that with all the members who participated in our last annual meeting, and just with the work that we've been doing throughout with partners globally and all the members of the Alliance, has been that centrally we need to be guided by and accountable to children and communities. We need to be leveraging and building on trusted relationships, use available means of use all the available means and safe communications, conduct contextual and individual risk assessments, we really need to be promoting and resourcing child well-being, and we need to adapt programs to the pandemic environment in a really contextual way and be learning from others who are doing so as well. Next slide. I'll skip that one. And so one of the initiatives that has arisen has been through a partnership with the Alliance and INEE, and is research on the impact of school closures under COVID-19 in humanitarian settings. The first phase of the research has already been published, and we'll put that link in the chat box soon. And it is highlighting both the protection and education risks to children, looking at their overall well-being. And the research that we'll be highlighting today focuses on 3 case studies: Democratic Republic of Congo, Lebanon, and Colombia. And it's implemented by Protect Them Foundation with our research teams, Biferd, Sinde, and Basil Akar and his team in Lebanon. It's a qualitative and participatory study, and we're working directly with children, with communities, as well as key informants at the global, national, and local levels. So it's really focused on getting children's voices and their experiences. That's one of the main gaps that has really come up, is what are children facing in their daily lives, and how can we uphold them, strengthen them, build on their own resources, build on what's happening, and see how we can best strengthen their well-being and protection. Next slide.
Sorry.
And so the priority is to really hear from those.
Sure. Okay.
Priority is to really hear from those on the ground. And so we are going to switch over to our research teams who are joining us from all over the globe. And first, we're going to have a couple of questions to get us thinking. I will turn it over to Basil. Basil will skip the Zoom poll questions, and I'll just go right to the Mentimeter poll. So if we can just put that Mentimeter code in the chat box. So what you'll do is you will click the Mentimeter link and follow that and vote on these 2 questions. Thank you, Tim. And Tim, if you can stop sharing screen, I'll share the results. Yes, thank you. This works. And so if you can start entering your ideas there. Basil, turn it over to you. Hopefully people can see the questions.
Yes, thank you, Laura. Hello, everyone. So our first question is, considering children living in humanitarian settings impacted by school closures, what risks to protection and well-being might children be facing?
Mom, what does it say?
I see some really interesting responses on the board coming up. We have responses like no access to protection if needed. There's maltreatment, increased stress at home. Someone gave an example of more family violence. There's much less contact with supportive teacher and school staff and even others who might be at the school, or just maybe complete lack of access to additional support, whether it's education or well-being and health. Yes, the loss of school feeding programs. Interesting. Some of these, many of these emerged in our findings as well. These are some great hypotheses to note before starting a study. This is great. They just keep rolling and rolling. Yes, isolation is definitely a significant risk to protection. Yes, isolation from peers, children, friends, school, and possible services. So move on to the next question, number 5. Considering children living in humanitarian settings impacted, oh no, this is number 4, sorry. That was, okay. Considering children living in humanitarian settings, oh, okay. Is the same question?
No, it's not. Infinite tense, literally.
Yes. What, sorry, considering children living in humanitarian settings impacted by school closures, what protective factors might support children's well-being? So go ahead, we invite you to type in your responses in the same box. Yeah, for some reason, the screen is not showing. Okay, there it is. Here are some examples. We have clear articulation between family and friends, maybe having being closer to home if it's a safe place, and an adult if it's a safe adult. So yeah, school is often stressful, so it could be a welcome break. And there's more parental time. I saw that. That's interesting. Could be difficult on the parents. Online support, online monitoring. Yep, teachers, social workers checking in to make sure the child's okay. Creating, here we have a chat, creating a child-friendly zone in the community. Someone wrote internet access, if it's provided, yeah?
Okay, thanks so much, Basil.
Thank you.
Everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I'm just gonna try to share my screen once more. You can see that okay? Great. Well, I'd like to transition now to a series of case study presentations about Lebanon, the DRC, and Colombia. And before doing that, I just wanted to show you kind of a illustration about the timeline of school closures that have happened as recent as June 2021. You can see the darkest parts of these three different linear bar graphs are illustrating the instances where there were government-mandated closures of educational institutions that affected almost all students. So it's a pretty solid chunk of time across all three country contexts. The lighter shade of purple is indications of when schools were partially open, and then so on and so forth into the more lighter colors are when schools were either on academic break or fully open. But it just gives you an illustration about how disruptive the pandemic-related school closures were to the experience of young people being able to go to school. So now I'd like to transition to our three country context representatives who've been doing fantastic field work for the couple of months now. And I'd like to start with Dr. Basil Akar, who's leading the Lebanon-focused research currently. Basil, over to you.
Thank you, Tim. If we could start with that, okay, there's a Lebanon slide. Okay, so Lebanon is a very small country on the Mediterranean Sea and situated in a place in the Arab region that is local also to conflicts in the wider area. So if we move to the next slide, I'll present the compounded crises that that included the global pandemic when it hit Lebanon. So, and this was the purpose behind questions like, in a humanitarian setting, meaning that we have crises existing before the global pandemic had hit. So we have long-running stressors, which means that, or which includes corruption. Corruption is a destructive expression of conflict that has not only affected the education and health sector, but across the other sectors, and has led to the economic collapse and political collapse today. We have political tensions from the
Basil, did we lose you?
I think we lost his audio. I don't know if it's his internet.
Sorry, I'm back. For some reason, it's been a little unstable tonight. And Lebanon also hosts the largest population of refugees per capita in the world, mostly from Syria, 1.5 million refugees from Syria, and just over 200,000 refugees from Palestine and others from Iraq, and Kurdistan and Afghanistan. The population of Lebanon is just over 5 million. Just so you know. So shocks are the conflicts that happened or that have happened in the last 2 years, or let's say 3 months prior or 4 months prior to the global pandemic and the nation lockdown. In October 2019, we had political uprisings. So we had about 6 weeks of road closures from protesters. And then when schools opened 1 or 2 weeks before Christmas break, they reopened in January for another 4 or 5, 6 weeks, and then they closed again in March. And they've been closed ever since, with only about another 6 weeks opening in between. In April, right after the schools closed, we had a crash in our currency because of the banking crisis and the economic collapse. Over 90% of the value of the Lebanese pound was lost. In August, also a result of corruption, we had the Beirut port explosion that displaced over 300,000 people in Lebanon and had caused serious damage to over 200 schools in the area. In January, we had a 6-week strike from teachers because of issues in pay. All the part-time or contractual teachers were receiving their salaries every 7 or 8 months. The teachers of the second shift, which is for the Syrian refugee children, had not received their salaries for about a year. And so the second shift actually was not running during the pandemic, during school closures. And then most recently, we have had a fuel and pharmaceutical storage, which has impacted the generators for electricity and fuel for transportation. And then this is during also the pandemic. In the next slide, I'm going to show you some highlights in the next 2 slides. These are just some highlights that I've selected from the findings and how the COVID-19 pandemic has affected the well-being and education of children. In non-formal education, meaning that these are educational programs run by NGOs, not by public schools or the private sector. They became more significant for refugees because they were the only source or access to education, source of and access to of education. Especially when the second shift for the refugees was closed. Online learning, yes, online learning became, sorry?
Sorry to interrupt, but just a quick time check.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Okay. So just to go through this, they found that there was even though learning was happening online, there was no access to very limited access to electricity, internet, and hardware. Of course, as some of you wrote in the qualitative survey, yes, there was more exposure to stress at home, and children from low to no income families were more vulnerable to child labor and early marriage. Next slide, please. So the parents, how the pandemic had affected the parents, we saw, I'll just select here, yes, battling mental health. And this ran across from parents, teachers, and social workers. There were testimonies of burnout, managing how they are managing the domestic responsibilities, and then the children's health, and then the children's studies. The teachers and social workers, please. Here we have, there was limited access for the children for social support services. However, some teachers and some social workers were able to create new relationships with parents as critical partners. These were, if you want to call them, pockets of promise that we saw was hopeful. And finally, yes, they were unprepared. It's important to remember that teachers and social workers in Lebanon, like in many areas like Lebanon, do not have the professional training or the written qualifications for that specific professional field of support. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you, Basil, very much. And apologize to rush you at the end. Now I'd like to turn to our colleague at the DRC, Jonas Habimana. Jonas, are you there?
I'm here. Hello.
Fantastic. Welcome.
How are you?
Thank you. 5 minutes. Welcome.
You are welcome. Okay. Okay. In terms of the context in DR Congo and in our research areas, the context that at the political level, the government is divided as the union between two parties. It seems that the government is now working with two parties, with the new president and the other party in Katanga in another area, and also the former president Joseph Kabila. It seems that the political level has many problems depending on the divisions, and there are many misunderstandings between political people. And also the nomination of the new electoral teams created a problem, because I've seen that at the government level, there are many misunderstandings about this election. And also teachers are not going to school since 4th of October to now. We are registering many demonstrations of children willing to go to school, but this is due to the free of charge to basic education not respected by the existing government. It seems that the government has many problems in terms of making in practice existing education policies. Next. In terms of the crisis, today we are seeing that medical staff are also demonstrated, and they are not working in Kinshasa as the main city of the country. But also we have seen that in the country, in the eastern region, 2 provinces are under the leadership of armed leaders, and this is creating a miss of trust between the population and people who are now leading the 2 provinces in North Kivu and the Ituri provinces. But also we are registering armed groups who are still operating in different areas of the eastern of DRC. In the DR Congo, the Ebola pandemic is now registered in Beni area. Beni area is not so far from where we are doing our research, because we are in the same province. And last week, the province has registered 6 cases of Ebola disease and more than 300 contact people. I was looking into the report today. The cases are increased up to 8 cases, and the contact people are now around 500 people. In terms of death, I've seen that in the 8 cases who have been tested positive of Ebola, 6 of people died, and from these 6 deaths, 4 are children. That seems that Ebola is also affecting children in this area. There is a stability on COVID-19 cases, because the government and the World Health Organization are doing vaccination, and the vaccination is progressing in different areas of DRC. And we have seen in the 2 months ago that COVID-19 cases was reduced up to now. But natural disasters within flooding have been registered in the different areas. Some areas in North Kivu and where we are doing our researches are affected by flooding nowadays. Next. Next, please. Can you go to the next?
I think Timothy may have lost internet. He looks frozen on my screen.
Yeah. Let me try to share.
Can you go to the next slide, please?
Jonas, I'll try to share slides if I can.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you all for your patience. We are live, and sometimes internet and technical issues might affect us for a minute. So thanks for your patience. Laura, let us know when you're ready and if you need assistance. Thank you.
Okay, it's there. Feel free to continue, Jonas, while I get it on presentation mode.
Okay. Some contextual situations in our research areas is that military operations are now done in our research areas within Rutshuru and the Masisi territories. We have seen that military operations are now done, and there are new displaced people in different areas where we are doing our research up to now. And also some kidnapping cases are registered in the areas of our research. Next. The impact of a school closure on children is that children are exposed to be associated to armed groups, but also we are registering early pregnancy and early marriage in our regions, but also children are used in labor, children are discouraged and some are going to use drugs, children are used in mining activities, and also children are traumatized because they are not going to school. And also children are going out their families and going to seeking livelihood activities. For example, we have seen that some children are living from DRC up to Uganda looking for cash for work activities in neighbors countries, but also some of children are going outside the country, going to seek job in neighbors countries, and as I said, in Uganda. Next. The COVID-19 has a serious impact to parents because parents are affected as the unique opportunity to care children is at school, but it's not the case. Here in DRC, parents don't have many strategies to care to children. Schools are the one opportunity to caring to children, but it's not the case as school closure has affected also parents. But also high consumption at the family level. This is the collapsing economy level, and the parents need to invest more in taking care of their children and cannot do farming and the business. Some parents have stopped their farming activities, they stopped their business because they need to be staying at home. But there is now a high impact on economy level because parents need to invest more by taking care to their children when also the economy is also decreased. Parents are developing resistant and losing hope, seeing how children cannot go to school. For example, I have seen that some parents also are demonstrating, they are complaining to the government, requesting to open schools because parents are now developing resistance, they are losing their hope also. Teachers are living a very challenging economic situation because they are not paid by the government, and also teachers are choosing other ways to survive. Some teachers are now resigning from teaching activities. They are going to do other activities like motorbikes. They are now looking to do many other business because they don't have the hope to the school opening. Next. I think now it's the Colombia moment, please. Can you go ahead? I finished my presentation. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, this is Maria Camila Ospina from Colombia. We are going to present our case with Andres Felipe Ospina and Simon Velasquez Matijasevic. We have also been working here in Colombia with another team. Colombia is located in South America. Could you please go to the next slide? Thank you. Okay, we'll just say some introduction to our context. We have 48 million people, 51% are women, 48% are men. Also, we have 22% of our population which are under 14 years of age. And we also have 7.8% who are under 4 years of age, women in early childhood. Can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. This is our map, Colombian map in South America. We have 33 departments. and our capital is Bogota. Is one of the locations of our research. We have also been working in the coffee region, which is Caldas, Risaralda, Quindío, 3 departments that are located within the coffee region. These both places have people in vulnerable situation, precariousness, with also a children's rights vulneration. Please, next. And we want to introduce some things that happened during the pandemic context. Here in Colombia, as the other countries said, we also have a lockdown and school closures that happened on March 15 of 2020. The school classes were suspended. All the schools in the country, the private ones and the public ones, were closed. Someone has the microphone, thank you. Then we also had in that same month, by March 17th, the declaration of economic, social, and ecologic state of emergency that got here to our national territory. And then afterwards, on March 2024, we have this obligatory and preventive isolation, which was a national government policy in which they told us to be in our houses, the lockdown. And then by November this year, there have been reported 5 million of positive cases of COVID-19, and over 120,000 people died here in our country, and over 4.8 million have recovered. Next, please. Simon.
Okay, thank you all. My name is Simon Velázquez Matijasevic, and I wanted to show you some data that we took from the social poll. This is a poll that have been done since July 2020, and it shows us some data of the pandemic context. So in the first graphic, we can see that there is no constant trend in all the months. In second place, that the lowest percentages of, this graphic shows us the percentage of children who that continue with educative or learning activities. So in September of 2020, for example, we had 83.7%. This means that the almost 16% of children stopped their education. The lowest percentages that we found in this period are September 2020, March 2021, and June 2021. The highest are February, April, and May of 2021. And also we've seen that since June, we have seen an increase. The next slide, please. Briefly, I want to show you the data of the regions where we are working. The first city with the highest percentage is Manizales with the 94%. Then Armenia, 91%. Then Pereira, 88%. And these 3 cities are the capitals all of the coffee region that Maria Camila explained before. And in the latest, sorry, I forgot the word. In the last city is Bogota with the 81%. The next slide, please. Now, in this graphic, we can see the reason why the children or youth didn't participate in educative or learning activities. The first reason is that the family cannot pay school tuition due to the reduction of the economic resources caused by the COVID-19 emergency. The second and the fourth reason are similar because they show us in the first place that the educative institution offers virtual classes, but there is no internet at home, and the other that the family doesn't have devices such as computer, tablet, or cell phones. So if we add these two gray bars, we can see that almost the 40% of children, they don't have what they need to study. Next slide, please. The last one. And this is the last slide. And here we can see the food safety, the consumptions of meal per day. And we can see three conclusions that by August 2021, the 30% of the homes in Colombia don't have the possibility to eat 3 meals per day. That between 2020 and 2021, the percentage of homes that eat only 2 meals per day have been increased. And finally, that the reduction of the percentage of the homes that eat less than 3 meals between 2020 and 2021 have been very smooth. And that's it.
Great. Thank you so much to our three country partners for their excellent and insightful presentations. I encourage you to check out the Protecnom website that was linked earlier in this chat to follow the research as we progress in the data collection and reporting process. Now I'd like to turn to a short panel discussion between our three country contexts and their representatives, Lebanon, the DRC, and Colombia. And I have one question for each of you, and we'll start in the order that we heard the presentations. The first is with Lebanon. So this question is directed to Dr. Basil. So in Lebanon, Basil, you mentioned how there are multiple compounding crises that children and families are dealing with. And I'm wondering, how might we as researchers and practitioners better understand the impacts of the pandemic in relation to these other issues that you mentioned are on the ground? Hope you're on mute, Basil.
Sorry, excellent question. Once we gathered the data and we started reading through it, we started to see three things emerging, or three ideas emerging. One was that the pandemic, or the school closures, started to amplify pre-existing issues that were in a way normalized or even seen as beneficial. For example, approaches to learning. We saw that during school closures, the approaches to learning in the classroom, which was basically a focus on memorization, were completely and even more unsustainable through online learning or distant learning. We also saw, prior to the pandemic, the governance, the approaches to governance that were, let's say, riddled with institutionalized forms of corruption were even more amplified through the responses, because the responses were patchwork, putting out fires, very temporary, because there were no mechanisms for contingency plans or strategies that address the roots. This is number one. The second way of making that kind of distinction was that we started to see issues that were new, that were not identified as real issues before. For example, the amount of time spent at home was extremely difficult for parents, teachers, and the children at many levels, whether it was stress, whether for parents to an extent, there was neglect of the child. And then the need for using technology. We had teachers for the very first time opening up a laptop. We had children never before having to walk around and see where they could get Wi-Fi. So this was new. And then the third is that, and this is on the brighter side, we started to see responses that we did not see before. We started to see teachers and social workers exercising more agency. Even though they may not have been prepared, there was some kind of moral responsibility that was triggered inside. It's a phenomenon. And they started to find ways to make things happen, whether it was staying up till midnight, talking with parents, and with the students, helping them with their work. But there were a lot of teachers that took it on themselves to learn how to use technology. So there were responses that we had not seen before. And they could be described as maybe adaptive just for the moment, and they could also be described as transformative, which I believe that if we nurture from now, they could be a momentum for more agentic action from the ground.
Great,
thank you.
Thanks, Basil. It's very helpful to hear, and especially it makes me think of how do we, as researchers and practitioners, kind of elevate or appreciate the heroic service that many teachers are making during this time, without revering them so much so that we forget to kind of think about those broader structural forces that are kind of shaping these responses that aren't sustainable in the longer run, and so how to like advocate for kind of on the ground response while also thinking about like the broader systems at play too. I recognize the time is short, so I need to move on to our second respondent, Jonas. I have a question for you. So as your presentation noted, your organization works in both child protection and education. And I wondered, can you share a good example of program adaptations to promote children's well-being in either child protection or education during the pandemic?
Thank you, Bassem. Thank you very much. Our organization is implementing some programs to adapt the context of COVID-19 to the education and child protection issues. For example, for now, our organization is helping the UNICEF and the government of North Kivu to promoting the distance learning in different locations of the eastern of DRC. As you may know, distance learning was seen as a new innovation in the education sector, with many challenges, because when the government of DRC decided to promote the distance learning, this was a new innovation in DRC. And as you may know, many people don't have access to the information mechanism. For example, we have seen that many rural areas, families, as they are also affected by poverty and the conflict, they didn't have any radio stations opportunity to help them in terms of following the distance learning lessons. What you have done, UNICEF was distributing millions of exercise books to children in different communities, but also we was pushing the UNICEF and the government to distribute a kind of radio stations in different families. But from us as an organization, we used to train some local volunteers who were visiting homes and mobilizing children in different areas by respecting also the COVID-19 prevention mechanism. We used these volunteers in different locations. Some volunteers were also organizing children in churches, in also public areas like football grounds, to ensure that children can be following the distance, the learning activities through local existing radios. But we were also helping the government to monitor, because the government was not able to monitor because all schools were not able to be working because they are not paid. So we were also helping the government to monitor how children are following distance learning through existing radio. But also we were also using some forms to ensure that all the communities, volunteers are using these forms to ensure that children can be are following the distance learning. So we are on the board. We are trying to support the government and partners. This was a new innovation for us. We are now doing the distance learning via more than 500 primary schools. But also we have seen also collecting some lessons, some good lessons, but also some challenges also. We are trying to push the government and the UNICEF to continue improving this learning system as an alternative to help children well when schools still closed. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jonas. That's a really great example of kind of simultaneously top-down and bottom-up advocacy to improve children's learning and protection during this difficult time. Thank you so much for sharing. I'd like to move now to Colombia. And I realize I'm giving you another challenge to be a bit succinct, given we have another activity to transition to in about 4 minutes. So to the Colombia team, I was wondering, you mentioned many challenges that children and families are facing during COVID-19. In your context, have you seen any good examples of being guided and accountable to children? Andreas, I can't hear you. You're still not. I'm not able to hear you, unfortunately.
Yeah, I see his microphone is live, Timothy. I don't know. And he is a co-host, so.
What about now?
Yes.
Now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Great. It was my settings. I was saying hello to all of you. I'm really happy to be here and to share this scenario with you. Well, all we agree that children and boys and girls have been one of the most affected populations during COVID-19 in the educational context. A good example, in spite of the deficient resources available to surpass the crisis in the most vulnerable countries, can be presented via school social programs. They have found strategies related to overcome the challenges through art and sport programs. More of them relied on digital strategies to open up, to gain knowledge and abilities other than academic ones. Also, the school teachers and educational actors have managed school resources to support families with food supplies in the poverty-stricken populations hit by the economic crisis resulted from the pandemic. Also, some school programs have been created, articulated actions with health, workforce, and other social services. Families have also found support from religious institutions and community leaders, especially in activities such as school reinforcement and childcare. Some other examples come from those families that have a closer approach to the school realities and dynamics, and vice versa. In consonance, the schools and family gaps have been shortened, promoting closer, empathic, and understanding relationship between both actors. However, this has posed new challenges as well, since the schools have reduced their academic school intensity, which has forced families to resort to strategies that have exceeded, in some cases, their capacities to respond to school demands. In those cases, that some of them have come to the community leaders to support the school reinforcement. To the other hand, the role of civil society organizations have been really important. They have placed on the public agendas all the challenges related to the new roles proceeded from the remote forms of education and work. These organizations have identified the importance of transforming the educational sector by enabling greater and better scholars and family interactions with their context. This means family involved in knowing and contributing to the construction of the education they want for the children. Also, planning educational strategies together allows knowing the context, learning through it, and solving problems in the context. It also means being able to access the minimum condition to give continuity to learning, especially for boys and girls and young people in rural areas. It also implies knowing much more about the way in which children and young people develop their skills and acquire new knowledge. Despite this comparative study demonstrates that these interactions do not occur in the same way in all contexts. They cannot occur in the same way because if there's something that pandemic leaves behind is the evidence of inequality and inequity in all levels, which is not limited to formal education, but also to those circumstances that go beyond school. In other words, family, children, and youngsters became aware that school is not only the place that teachers, is not only the place to learn. This is very much what I can share.
Great. Thank you so much, Andreas. And I really appreciate that focus on accountability as well. I really appreciate it. And I think across the 3 countries, we can really see some commonalities and divergences when it comes to shared kind of compounding adversities during this time. At this moment, I'd like to turn it back over to my colleague, Laura Lee.
Thank you so much to our teams in Lebanon and DRC and Colombia for your presentations and your insights. So much to think about. So much to think about that we'd like you to start thinking about how we can apply some of this to our own work and just work together with some of these concepts in small groups. So we're going to go to a group session, group brainstorm session now, a group activity. We've put in a Jamboard link in the chat. I'll share just for 1 minute so you can have a look. The activity is to go into groups of, you'll probably be in a group of 8 to 10 people, just to quickly debrief the session by thinking what critical action you can apply to your own work, and how can we draw on or adapt on these critical actions to better anticipate children's well-being in infectious disease outbreaks. So you can go to the slide, you'll see on the first slide it says group 1, on the second slide it says group 2. Just go to the group number that you're assigned, go to that slide number. This is where you can take notes. You can click on the 4th icon down where there's a sticky note. You can write your thoughts and then save that, and those sticky notes will go on here. So you can be writing down notes as you talk to your colleagues in this session. And looking at the time.
Yeah. So Laura, I should go ahead and open the Zoom breakout rooms.
Yeah, so for 10 minutes.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and open those now. And everyone has been invited to join a room.
Hi, Pragati.
Hi.
It's like the breakout rooms are
So let me make sure everyone
very big, like 18 people per room.
Well, the thing is, see, like you don't have, everyone doesn't join. So the number of people who join are
okay, I see
of that. So we learned that. So if
there's lots of people that it says not joined. Okay, great, no problem.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much.
No problem. So we will be, so just let me know when you want to bring them back, or even as a co-host, I think you can send a message to all the rooms if there's anything else you want to add.
Yeah, great.
And just remind people what their job is. And I think I see some new people who have just joined. Let me invite them to a breakout room as well.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Do we have everyone back to the plenary? Laura?
Everybody is back, Audrey. Sorry.
No, no worries.
The control panel and all these screens. So yes, everyone is back.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Laura, if you can put up quickly the slides, otherwise I think I can sort that out. But thank you everyone for sharing your thoughts in the different breakout rooms. I particularly enjoy meeting colleagues from a very diverse group or context. In my own breakout room, I had, if I remember, I had at least Pakistan, Nigeria, and Caribbean islands, which was fantastic to kind of connect all together. So before we leave and we say goodbye, just a final reflective question as a takeaway. Considering the impact of COVID-19 and its secondary impacts, such as school closures, on children, what is one action that you will take away from this workshop to support children well-being in your context? So if you have some idea, you are free to kind of leave us a note in the chat while I'm gently but surely saying goodbye to you all with a couple of additional information. But we would love for you to kind of reflect about the critical action that you think you can support in your own country. Next slide, Laura, please. All right, so as I mentioned at the beginning, the Alliance has quite a lot of resources related to COVID-19 and child protection. You can find this on our website under the COVID-19 tab. So last year we had an entire annual meeting, and if you go on this tab, you will see all the resources related to the annual meeting, including summary of abstracts of the presentation that we had then. So additional great presentation from colleagues on child protection and COVID-19. We have as well all the resources that we have mentioned, the technical notes, the annexes. We have obviously the webinars, the podcast, the evidence synthesis and the database on child protection and COVID-19. And you had the pleasure to hear some of the last updates and outcomes of the ongoing school closure research. So next slide, please. On this note, if you need to contact us, feel free to contact us at covid-19@alliance.cpha.org. Sorry, it's getting late on my side and my French is coming out. And either to me, audrey.bollier@thealliancecpha.org. We would like to thank you very much for your time today, for some of your discussion and participation in the chat and share of resources. We have seen that. It has been a pleasure to come and present to you, and we wish you the very best, and hopefully you will enjoy the rest of this World Summit over the next few days. Thank you so much.